All right, so Node.js, what is it, right? It's a platform. This is coming straight from their website, so I didn't make this up. Platform built on Chrome's JavaScript runtime for easily building fast, scalable network applications. Node.js uses an event-driven, non-blocking I/O model that makes it lightweight and efficient, perfect for data-intensive real-time applications that run across distributed devices. Current versions 0.10.2.8, and you go to nodejs.org, which if you want to follow along, you should definitely go there right now and install it. So if you click on that, here you'll have the installation button here. You'll get an automatic download for your operating system. I'm not sure how they do that, but if you go to downloads here, you'll see all the different binaries you can download to install for Node. So definitely do that. Another thing you might want to install if you want to follow along, especially for later on in the presentation when we talk about Gemnasium and Travis CI, you're going to want to have GitHub installed, the client for whatever operating system you're on. I'll show you the, that's nice. I'll show you the sites for that too. So there's windows.github.com for the Windows client right here. And there's also mac.github.com, which has the Mac client. So you can download that and probably get that running before you need to install it later on. So installing Node is really simple, especially on Windows. Just hit next. I've already installed it, but it's just a very simple installation. Just go through default questions and everything. So not a very difficult thing to install, but this is a mouthful, right? This explanation of what Node is. So I'll be honest, the first time I was introduced to Node, I looked at this description and I was like, okay, cool, so I can write chat apps with that, or some Socket.io stuff that I might need. Great, yeah, but it's actually used for a lot more than that. So I think I wanted to really, pound that in everyone to let them know like what it can be used for. So this is a list of, and the link is at the bottom of where I got this list from, of where Node.js should be used. Like, you can use it for a lot of things, but this is definitely, if you're doing any of these things, you probably should be using Node. So you got chat applications, an API on top of an object database, queued inputs, data streaming, proxy, brokerage, stock traders dashboard, application monitoring dashboard, system monitoring dashboard. All these things are really great for Node. Especially you need live communication. You don't want to like reload the page or anything like that. You get everything you need right there. So it doesn't stop there. You can also use Node.js for server-side web applications. Notice this is not in the list of where Node.js should be used per se. It definitely can be used there. It may or may not be a good decision for your company or your situation. So it just depends on what you're doing, right? But here's one thing that was mentioned where it should not be used, which is heavy server-side computation and processing. So I can only imagine what that might be for you, but big data processing, maybe some sort of image resizer or something like that, maybe it wouldn't be the best first choice to use for something like that. So my coworker Prabin, he showed me this book last week. It's called Node.js the Right Way. It's a really small book. Actually, I read it in like a day. Skimmed through most of it though, honestly. And it's really, really good. It talks about wrangling the file system. It talks about networking with sockets, robust messaging services, accessing databases, scalable web services, web apps. The things that stuck out to me were spawning off child processes and managing them. And yeah, a lot of that was really interesting to me because I've been wondering like how to scale up applications when you run out of resources and things like that. So it gets into that in great detail. If you're interested in some more advanced topics after this, I would highly suggest at least running that book or reading it and taking a skim at it. So that said, let's talk about npm. When you install Node, be it on Windows or Mac, it used to be back in the day you had to install npm separately from Node on Mac. Now that's not the case. It comes packaged with it, so you don't really need to worry about that. So a lot of people, when they talk about npm, they put it in all caps like it's an acronym, but it's not. So I wanted to point that out, that contrary to belief of many, npm, and this is coming straight from their website, is not in fact an abbreviation for Node Package Manager. It's a recursive backronymic abbreviation for NPM is not an acronym. If it was Nina, then it would be an acronym and thus incorrectly named. NPM should never be capitalized unless it is being displayed in a location that is customarily all caps, such as a title of man pages. Seriously, the NPM project is named after its command line utility, which was organically selected to be easily typed by a right-handed programmer using a US QWERTY keyboard layout. So it's nothing special, ending with the right ring finger in a position to type the key for flags and other command line arguments. That command line utility is always lowercase, though it starts most sentences it is a part of. So, I mean, you can think of it as Node Package Manager. That's definitely what it is, but you know, that's not what the NPM actually stands for. So, be aware of that. There's a lot of Mac users that I can see here. For them, it might not be as exciting as it is for me. I'm predominantly a Microsoft guy, but I was going to talk about TypeScript today a little bit. If you haven't heard about it, it's a subset of JavaScript. It lets you write JavaScript the way you really want to. A superset, sorry. It's a typed superset of JavaScript that compiles to plain JavaScript. Any browser, any host, any OS, open source. So, you know, Microsoft isn't that popular for coming out with big open source projects like this, but here they are trying to be more progressive, and they've created a great tool. You can install it right now if you want to, you know, again, follow along. With npm install -g TypeScript, you will need sudo for that, and then you can compile. If you want to compile any TypeScript file on your computer, you just run tsc, which is TypeScript compiler, hello world.ts, and it will convert it into JavaScript. So you can go to typescriptlang.org and you can see their little trendy website here, and you'll see, you know, some video from Anders Hellsberg here explaining all the tidbits of it. But it's a cool project. I definitely recommend checking it out. I've been following it pretty closely, so you'll definitely see me, you know, touting about that. So here's Anders Hellsberg, just in case you're wondering where TypeScript came from. He's a predominant Danish software engineer who co-designed several popular and commercially successful programming languages and development tools. He was the original author of Turbo Pascal and the chief architect of Delphi. He currently works for Microsoft as the lead architect of C# and core developer on TypeScript. So he knows what he's doing. He's a pretty popular guy, and very popular, especially in the Microsoft community. So today I'm going to show you guys how to build a CLI. So in case you didn't know, what is a CLI? It's a command line interface, a type of human-computer interface in a way for humans to interact with computers that relies solely on textual input and output. So for example, if you wanted to create, I'm going to talk about my side project later called Blink, but you know, if I'm going to create a program, a CLI called Blink, and I want to compile something, I would write blink compile foo.js, and the CLI would be able to digest that information along with any arguments you might pass in, and you know, process it and call the API internally. So you know, if you want to make a little game or make some sort of preprocessor or your own compiler, anything like that, you can use a CLI to do just that. So in this case, blink compile foo.js would create foo.css. So let's get started with actually getting into it. Let's just dive into it. And I don't know how a guy fits into a little truck that small. He might be a little person, I'm not sure. Just saying. So one thing we're going to need right now is probably want to install Grunt. So Grunt is a task runner that's very popular right now. There's definitely some other task runners out there that you could use. You've probably heard about Grunt if you're in the JavaScript community before, but you might not know what it is. So if you want to install it right now and get the leg up on what we're going to talk about later, type sudo npm install -g grunt CLI. Now when you do a -g with npm, that's saying that you're going to install it globally. So you'll then have access to the grunt command globally. So any folder that you're in, you can just type grunt and you'll get the CLI. You can type grunt commands. So that's all the -g is doing for you. If you don't do a -g, that means you're trying to install a package directly in the folder that you're in. So just be aware of that. That's why it requires sudo, is because it's trying to install in like your user local bin or something like your global npm folder, wherever that might be for your operating system. So For Windows, of course, you don't need sudo. Just use a command prompt that's got administrator privileges, and you're good to go. So if you go to gruntjs.com, you'll see, why would I even use a task runner? Why use Grunt? You can look into this later. I'm not going to go into it too much, but their website anyway. But I definitely wanted to point out what it can be used for in this presentation. So, but before I do that, I want to talk about some other tools that are out there that are gaining a lot of traction right now. Gulp.js is the streaming build system, and it's actually getting a lot of traction. It's getting very popular more and more these days. Its idea is that it wants to be a lot faster with doing build tasks. So it wants to deal with streams, input and output of streams, and piping them to where they should be processed through whatever means, minification, whatever it needs to be. And then they just dump that stream to wherever you want to write it. So unfortunately, there's a lot of tools that can't really take advantage of this because there's no real API for a lot of things, like TypeScript, for example, even Compass. They have a Compass gulp task for you, but it doesn't really, have an API. So it creates a sub-process, and it goes through a lot of mumbo-jumbo to make it actually work. So sometimes the performance might not be as much depending on your build system, but sometimes it could drastically improve the performance of your build. Broccoli is about trees, not files. So it's talking about an input file tree, and it's going to do something with it, maybe minification, whatever it might be, and then when it dumps that file tree to a new file location, a folder location. Fez is kind of probably losing popularity, but it has a different paradigm for doing some build things as well. So just something to look into. So gruntfile.js. This is what drives your Grunt task runner on your application. So you could say that you want to start with this file when you're creating a Node application. If you want to have any build tools running at all in your application, which you probably do, you want to create this file. So if you're on a Mac in a command shell, I'm going to create a new, actually I already created the folder. I'm going to create a new project named Newb. So I'm going to change directory into that Newb folder. And from here, I'm going to touch gruntfile.js. And so now you see, these are some Visual Studio files here, but gruntfile.js is there. And I have to probably show you what goes in there, of course, but I'll have to look at my Blink project a little bit later to show you all the nitty-gritty details of that. Before we get into that too much, though, let's talk about npm and init. So you want to create a new Node package, and you want to publish this later on to the npm repository. That's going to be right here, npmjs.org. You can see, you can search for packages here. If I search for Blink, you'll see it right here at the top. As you can see, it's not popular because nobody knows about it. I just released it last night. So yeah, but it's got some badges up here telling you about the build's passing. I'll talk about this later with Travis CI for continuous integration. Tells you that your dependencies are up to date, gives you a little description, README, everything. So if you want to actually take your project and you want to take it and publish it to npm, you can do that very easily. You just need to initialize your Node project with npm. You just type npm init, and here's what you're going to see. Yeah. This one, probably not, but if I do magnifier, I could probably show you something. Right click this one? Okay. Font. 16 maybe, 12. No. Infinity and beyond. 1020. See what that looks like. Is that better? Cool. So I just typed npm init, and I already had Node installed, so it knows what npm init means. It's going to ask me what I want to name this project, and it's already assumed that I want to name it Newb because I'm in the Newb folder. So I'm going to say yes. I'm just going to hit OK. It wants to know what version. Just hit enter. Description. I'm going to say compile stuff. Entry point So the entry point is going to be like if somebody wants to import your package for API usage, they want to use it and like do their own thing with it from an API standpoint. This entry point is where Node is going to tell it to point to. So whatever module you export from this file, Node is going to use that and give it to whoever's asking for it. We'll get into that a little bit more later, but for now I'm going to put it as ./lib/API.js. So anyone asking for Newb is going to get my API. We haven't created this file, API.js, yet, but we'll get into that too. So the test command, if we're using Grunt as we are, very common, you're going to have a Grunt command named grunt test. So you type that in there. Now it wants to know my Git repository. Now, I don't have one yet. I could create one right now. Why don't I do that? Let's see here. I'll show you right now. Go to github.com. Enter your username. If you don't have a user account, now's the time. So click on repositories here, and you can create a new repository. So right here, I'm just going to call it Newb, and description, compile stuff. I'm going to delete this later, by the way, in case you were wondering, unless you want to look at it. But you'll see most of what I'm talking about in Blink, so I'll talk about that more. You can initialize your project with a README. This is useful if you already know in advance like what kind of language you're going to be using. They've got all sorts of stuff in here, like every possible language you could imagine. And it'll have a lot of like git ignore files and things in there for you automatically. So it's actually really useful. So you can add a license. I'll add MIT. And then you just hit create repository. So now I've already got a repository created up here. And it's going to be really confused when I try and clone this project because I already have that folder. So I'm going to get rid of that real quick. Yeah, I think I've got a hook on it. Oh no, oh, it's the shell. All right, let's finish this. Git repository, HTTPS, I don't even know. Let me see here. So if you want to get the repository URL, it's going to be right here. HTTPS clone URL. Click this copy to clipboard, and you can now paste it directly here where it's asking for your Git repository. So there it is. Hit enter. Keywords, I'm going to say Newb, compile, stuff. There you go. Gedmal, license MIT, and then it says, is this okay? So overview it, say yes, and it creates that file for you. So if I cat, you might wonder what file it's creating. If I ls, I'll see package.json now exists in my project folder. So if I cat that, it's going to look exactly like what they just showed me. So here you see the project, it's just a JSON file, right? It's got the project name up here, the version, description, your main entry point. It's got your script section, which is where your test command resides, your repository keywords, everything I just typed. So I'm going to close this for now so I can clone the repository and show you what that's all about. 2. Okay, so now I should be able to click clone in desktop right here, which is probably the easiest way to clone if you don't want to do it from the command line. If you're going to do it from the command line, you just type git clone and then you paste that URL in there. But it's kind of outside the scope of this presentation to talk about GitHub too much, but click clone in desktop and it will fire up your GitHub client. And in this case, it's already created this license readme right here. It's already tracking this project for me. So I can click this little tools and options guy, or I can click the backtick key on the keyboard, and it will open a shell. If I say, open a shell here. If you have a preference for PowerShell or Git Bash in Windows, you can go back to your options right here, tools options, and you can select what your default shell is. So I've chosen Git Bash because I like that one. So going back there, pop open a shell, And now I can see that I'm on branch master and I'm completely in sync with my upstream. That's what the U equals is saying. So get status, I've got a shortcut for get status, by the way, just GS, but it says I'm on branch master, nothing commit. So everything's clean. And in my folder, I have just the license and the README. But I want to get my other files in there, so I'm going to copy those in. So I got all that. And just open up the project again. So these are the files we're working with right now. Not too many files yet. The Grunt file is completely empty. But let's see what we're going to talk about next. Back here. Okay, so that command wrote the package.json file for you, which is really all you need to publish something to the NPM registry. Granted, that would be pretty useless, and they definitely advise against not sitting on a project in NPM just to get the name, but there you go. So ignore that. Talk about that later because that's not going to work. So let's move on to this guy. So if we want to install some packages for our CLI, it's just been my experience that these packages are really useful for a CLI. So CLI color, first of all, you should probably run this while I'm explaining it to get the leg up. But what you want to do is type npm install --save. I'm doing the shell right now. npm install --save CLI-color space get-like-CLI. I can't see anything. Node.extend. What's strip-bomb and TypeScript-require. Strip-bomb TypeScript-require. So that's going to run this matrix kind of view of what's going on with your npm install. And then if everything goes swimmingly, you'll see everything that you just installed. And if you do npm ls, you'll see a list of all the node packages you have installed. So just to see what happened here is, as the description here says, this will install your runtime dependencies into the dependencies section of your package.json file. So if I cat my package.json file now, you'll see that it's added a dependencies section with all of those packages in there. Now these are runtime dependencies. So if you have a project that when you run your project, it depends on certain things, these are they. There's other dependencies you have which are dev dependencies, which are only required for build time type of things. So we're going to install those next. So down here, npm install --save dev is going to put it in a completely different section. You want to install chai, which is your assertion library for testing. Grunt, in order to run any grunt commands, you're going to need to install grunt. Grunt contrib clean, which is this is used to kind of just wipe out some files in your file system if they've been generated temporarily for your build process. You might have like a temp folder that you're generating things into, and then you'll concatenate some things, minify some things, and then you'll throw it in a dist folder. But when it's in that interim step, you're just going to be, creating throwaway files. So grunt contrib clean will just clean them right up. And then grunt contrib watch is going to be the grunt watch system. You're going to want to, especially in the case of TypeScript, you're going to watch your TypeScript files. If anything changes, you want to compile those files and put the JavaScript source files where they belong. If you're using CoffeeScript, there will be a similar task for that. Grunt mocha test is going to be the test command that we're going to be able to run because we installed this package. That's really all I need to say about that. That's the testing framework, Mocha, if you haven't heard about it. It's very expressive. I much prefer it over Jasmine from what I've seen. And then grunt TypeScript compile is what's actually going to, of course, compile your TypeScript files. Load grunt tasks is interesting because it's the only grunt plugin from, I guess, the grunt team. I'm not sure if it's actually supplied by them. But it's the only one that does not start with the grunt prefix. And the reason why is because in your grunt file, which is just a configuration file, by the way, you need to actually call out every single module, every single plugin that you're going to use. Load grunt tasks is pretty smart, so it's going to look through your whole packages that you have installed for anything starting with grunt dash, and it's going to load them for you automatically, so you don't have to actually call that out. I'll show you that in the file in a bit, but just explaining what these packages are doing for you. Mocha is again the testing framework, which needs to exist alongside the grunt mocha test command. Sign on is going to give you an ability to like stub methods out and say, you know, hey, I have this method here, and I expect that when I click this control, I expect this function to be called with these arguments. You know, that's what it's going to allow you to do. And sign on chai is going to be more expressive about that language. It's going to allow you to be more expressive, like saying called with exactly these arguments, stuff like that. Time grunt is something that's kind of for free, so every time you run a grunt command, time grunt is going to go in there and just tell you how long it took. So if you feel like you're having performance issues, you want to kind of monitor what's going on, maybe play around with your grunt file and do some performance tuning. Time grunt's a great tool just to have running at all times to figure out what's going wrong. So that was a lot of packages, I know, but you know, it takes a while to get used to them, but you know, these are the ones that we need to install right now. So I'm going to do it, npm install --save-dev chai grunt. I wish I had two monitors. Grunt contrib clean. Let's see here. Grunt contrib watch. Grunt mocha test. Let's see here. Grunt TypeScript compile. Load grunt tasks. Feel free to ask any questions if you guys have any. I don't mind. Anybody have any questions at this point? Yeah?
Why TypeScript instead of CoffeeScript?
So that's a good question.
You repeat it?
Yeah, he asked why TypeScript instead of CoffeeScript. So again, I'm more of a Microsoft guy, so it makes sense, right? But you know, to be as unbiased as possible, CoffeeScript, what it does, right, is it takes their language and it compiles it into JavaScript, just like TypeScript does, right? But CoffeeScript completely changes changes the syntax of JavaScript quite a bit. So the delta between what you're looking at with a CoffeeScript file versus a JavaScript file, especially when you're debugging, it's going to look a lot different. And so you're going to have to kind of figure that out, right? With TypeScript, it's actually still JavaScript, but it's added type information to it. So if you take a vanilla JavaScript file and you run it through the TypeScript compiler, it's going to come out the same way it came in. JavaScript is TypeScript. I mean, it'll run. TypeScript, however, lets you add more information like types to it, of course. You can say what types you're passing into functions, be they a number type, an any type. You can say an array, what type of an array. I'll show you some more of that in a bit. But the reason why that's important, especially for me being on Windows, is because when I'm using Visual Studio, and I'm especially using these like Mocha, sign-on chai, and whatnot, I'm typing out my specs and I'm saying I'm expecting this to be true, or this to have length 2, or something like that. If I want to prevent myself from looking at the documentation every second to figure out what I can actually type, I can actually have a TypeScript definition file which gives me insight into the interfaces that those libraries make available to me. So I'm getting IntelliSense, I'm getting little code hints as I'm typing them, right? And it's showing me exactly, I could probably even show you right now on Blink, just to give a general view of that. If I look in my spec file here for the block spec, just to show you how this works, I can say right here, oh yeah, font, thanks, Ken. Thought that sounded like you. All right, see that okay? So I can say expect, you know, some value, let's say true, to, see how I'm getting the IntelliSense here? Well, now I don't have to look up the documentation. I can just say, oh, okay, well, to be above, you know, and then it tells me, oh, I can pass in a number right there. Okay, well, above 5, you know, obviously true and 5 are not compatible. But and then you can say some message if you want to get information about why that's failed. So in this case, I can say expect true to be true or to be false, and whatever value is in there, I'll get really good type information here. So I hate looking up documentation if I don't have to, and that's probably my #1 reason for not switching to Mac, is because I lose IntelliSense. I don't have Visual Studio unless I'm running in parallels or something, and I've only heard that that's not the greatest experience in the world. So, call me a fanboy if you want. I don't judge. If you want to use whatever you want to use, that's totally fine. But for me, I love TypeScript. So that's why I use it. Okay, so got a couple more packages to install here, right? Let's see here. Load grunt tasks, mocha sign on chai. And time grunt. So if all goes well, this will install just fine. So what this is doing is it's actually going to install all these packages just like the -- save command did, but it's going to install it in a different section called dev dependencies. If you don't use -- save or -- save dev, it's not going to put it in your package.json file at all, and nobody else is going to know about it. So you really do need to use those in pretty much all cases, unless you absolutely know what you're doing. So I can go ahead and cat my package.json file right now, and I'll see that there's now a dev dependencies section. It's got chai, grunt, all these packages that I've installed, along with the versions with them. And there's a little caret character before each version, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, which is called semantic versioning. Well, that's not what that's called, but that will allow you to install the latest version up to a point, up to any breaking changes point. So now we have all those packages installed for Grunt. This is just to make Grunt work, but we're not done yet. So Bower is a really great tool for installing. It says a package manager for the web, right? So if you got a website, it makes total sense. You want to install jQuery, you want to install Modernizer, anything that's an actual script that you're going to install on your page, right? In your head block or wherever. So Bower allows you to install those in a way that's managed, right? So it's a package manager. It's going to manage those packages and give you updates to them without tracking them down and installing them yourself. So you can keep track of it and know that you're always using the latest version, up until the point that you get a breaking change, in which case you should read the change log. But I want you guys, if you want to follow along, to install Bower as well, because there's a couple packages we're going to need here too. So again, it's a sudo command npm install -g Bower. This is brought to you by Twitter. If you go to bower.io, you can see there's a search packages button here, and you can search for all sorts of stuff here. You can see Bootstrap is there, jQuery. These are very common packages that you're going to need on a web application. Granted, I'm not actually writing a web application right now. I'm writing a CLI. So why in the world do I need Bower, right? Well, as it so happens, okay, let's actually do this. Back at the shell, I'm going to run Bower init. After you install Bower, you should be able to run Bower init, and it's going to do pretty much the same thing that npm init did. It's going to ask you what's the name of your package, what version you on, all that good stuff. And apparently it's going to take a while. There we go. So Newbs is the name of the package, version, description, compiles stuff, all the same stuff, main file, ./lib, API, .js. It's not, I'm not actually going to publish this to the Bower directory, so I'm not really exporting anything. So I'm just going to hit enter on this one and say noob compile stuff. That's me, license MIT, homepage, got it. So it's pretty smart about what's going on with your package. It's probably looking at your package.json file in some cases, I'm not sure, but it's pretty smart. So add commonly ignored files to your ignored list. Yeah. A lot of this stuff doesn't really matter unless you're actually going to publish a Bower package. So at the very end, it asks me, would you like to mark this package as private, which prevents it from being accidentally published to the registry? Yes, I do, because I am not actually planning on publishing this. It does look good. And so that's what it exports right there. Very similar to the package.json file. It's just a JSON file. But this goes into the Bower.json file. So if I cat Bower.json, I see that's the file we just created. So it adds private true when I say that I don't want it to be published. And this means if somebody was to accidentally type, Bower publish, it's not going to do anything. So you can feel safe about that. So yeah, so I'm using TypeScript, and I did talk a little bit about the type information, what that gives you. So let me call that out a little bit. There's a GitHub repository called definitely typed right here, and this one has all sorts of TypeScript definition files for you right here. So you can see they've got jQuery, I'm sure, is going to be in here, right? You've got handlebars, you've got a lot of popular JavaScript libraries that you know and love. And so what are these files, right? These are definition files for TypeScript. Well, since jQuery was not written in TypeScript and handlebars was not written in TypeScript, some of the community, they get together, they'll just create these definition files, which are really just interfaces into how those libraries can be used. So the library doesn't have to be written in TypeScript for you to get that type information, as long as somebody creates one of these definition files, which, as it turns out, there's a lot of them out there. So it looks something like this. It's saying, hey, this is the jQuery Ajax settings, and it's got all these different properties that you can call, or sometimes methods that you can call. Right, so it's got all this good stuff in there. It's got the jQuery static. jQuery, yeah, I don't want to go, jQuery's huge, right? I'm not going to get into it too much. But we can see, you got the get request in here. So get URL, the URL is a string, the data is any type, the success is any type, data type is any type, and it returns a jQuery XHR object. So this is a huge file, really, but it gives you all the information that you need to interface with jQuery. So understanding that's why I'm going to have us install DT Node, which is the definitely typed definition file for Node, since we're writing in Node, right? So I hope this makes a lot more sense later. I know there's a lot to digest. Again, if there's any questions, please stop me. So it must be a lot for especially first timers. So bar install -s save DT Node. So there that goes. It installs it just like npm installs it, but it goes into a different folder. So let me show you the folder structure here. Go to GitHub, Newb, and I can see that when I run, I can't really magnify this one so much, but I got a node modules folder here, and it has just installed all my packages into their respective folders. And if any one of these packages has dependencies of their own, it will install it into another node modules folder. And it goes as deep as it needs to go, which is a real pain in the ass sometimes, because you might have a package that has dependencies that have dependencies that have dependencies really far down the way. And on Windows, it's especially pain, because if you want to delete that package, it gets confused because the file path is too long. Ken and I have seen this, and you have to go in there and do some real heinous stuff to get rid of it. But anyway, that's how Node works. You've got packages, they have their own dependency management, and that's how things don't collide with each other. So you don't, even if Grunt contrib clean relies on node.extend version 1 and some other package relies on node.extend version 3, it doesn't matter, right? They're not being installed over each other. They're being installed in their respective packages. So it's a beautiful thing. Bower Components is the same way. In this case, DT Node doesn't have any dependencies, so that's where it ends. But as you can see, it just installs this node.d.ts file. So nothing crazy, but that's how it works. As it turns out, though, I want to install not just DT Node, but I want some information, some type information about Mocha, Sign-On, and Sign-On Shy. So I'm going to go ahead and install those too. Bower install -- save dev. Bower install -- save dev. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you install like this every single time, or do you have something that automates this process?
So you could go into the package.json file yourself and type it out, and maybe even go to their website and look at what version's the latest. But if you don't want your eyes to bleed, you should probably just run it from the command line. I don't know of another way to do it other than command line or just going to the website and seeing what version. Do you know a way?
Yeoman?
Oh yeah, Yeoman is a scaffolding tool.
Okay.
Yeah, so I could talk a little bit about Yeoman in a bit too, but I'm not going to go too much into depth about that.
Sure.
Yeah, but that's used for something else. So,
Okay.
yes, it will automate this. Now, had I actually taken Blink as it is, right, my side project, and created a Yeoman generator with all of the TypeScript dependencies in place and Bower and all that, I actually want to do that. I just haven't had the time yet. But yeah, that would be beautiful, right? Like, because then you could actually just type yo, whatever I want to call it, like node TypeScript, right? And then you just say install or whatever, and then Yeoman will present you with like all the questions that it needs about, like, hey, do you want to use TypeScript or CoffeeScript? And it'll install CoffeeScript if you're into that, right? You can do all that, yeah. So Yeoman is definitely a great tool for that. But it does take a lot of work to create a good generator. So haven't gone there yet. Not on this one. So right here I'm going to install DT Mocha, sign on and sign on shy. DT Mocha, DT sign on, DT sign on shy. And also too, if I did this with Yeoman, right, like we would have been done like 20 minutes ago. I would have been like, all right guys, have fun, and you wouldn't learn anything because it's just like so easy, right? So if you want to actually know how the inner, like the nitty-gritty details of Node are working, this is how. Once you understand this, you can go on and build Yeoman generators of your own, and you can go to town. And feel free to do that on my project too, because I would like one of these. So, yeah, by all means. All right, so I'm installing these guys, a few more packages. Yes, this was painful, wasn't it? I mean, it was a lot of stuff to install. The Yeoman generator would make this a lot easier. So I've installed all the dependencies that I need now. I'm pretty sure I'm done. I hope I'm done. Let's see what slide comes next, because I forget everything I do 5 minutes ago. All right, so let me talk a little bit about semver. Now that we're done installing all these packages, right? You saw the version numbers next to each one, like 1.2.3. It's got that caret at the beginning of the version number. So when you're creating a package, you typically want to, like start off at like version 0.0.0, and then as you're making fixes, you're doing 0.0.1, 0.0.2, 0.0.3. And so the patch version is at the very end, and that's when you make backwards compatible bug fixes, right? So you're fixing things, but you're not breaking anything, right? But now you want to introduce a new feature. You want to introduce feature X, right? That's a minor version. So if you want to take your 0.0.5 and you want to introduce a new feature, well, now you have to introduce 0.1.0. And now that has your new feature. Again, this is a backwards compatible feature. You didn't break anything, right? The moment you decide to introduce a feature or even fix a bug that breaks changes with past versions, that's when you give a major version. So there's kind of a misconception out there, which is that, why is Node, if I go to Node.js.org, right? Why is Node on version 0.10.28? It seems like they're not really prime time, right? Are they ready for like prime time? They're only on 0.10.28. They're not even on version 1.0 yet. Well, that just shows that they have good development practices and they plan things ahead, right? They're introducing new features without breaking changes. That's actually a good thing. We like to see this. If you go to Gulp.js, you'll see something completely different. You'll see they're on version 3 something because they keep breaking things. That's fine, as long as they say they're on a different version, but it's just a different team. So that's how they work. So there's nothing wrong with these versions if you see them that way. Don't get turned off and think that it's not ready to use per se, unless they've actually said that, this is beta, pre-alpha something, and use it at your own discretion. So I just wanted to talk about semver because, hey, maybe I want to use your package, right? You created something pretty cool. I want to use it, and I install it, and everything's great. And I've got like 100 packages going on because my application is insane, right? And everything's working great until Friday at 5 o'clock when you decide to make a change, and now I can't do anything because everything breaks. And so I hate you now because you've just broken everything that I made, and I can't figure out what's going on. And now I have to actually track down your package and figure out what broke, submit an issue on GitHub, complain about it, even though you did it for free. So why would I complain, right? That's kind of a dick move. Don't do that. But you know, that's what happens. That's why you don't want to break the version. If you follow these rules, these paradigms for semantic versioning, you'll be in good cahoots with everybody, right? So don't break my build. All right, so let me talk a little bit about Blink. So I just started Blink a little while ago, actually. My wife over there, she read like all the CSS and JavaScript. Well, she went through the whole JavaScript like Code Academy, and also a CSS book that we have for what's the name of that book? I don't remember, but it was pretty good. And she was all ready to go, like ready to start CSS, right? But of course, things have come a long way since like say 10 years ago, right? So we do CSS a lot differently. We do JavaScript a lot differently. So she's sitting down, and I'm trying to tell her like, hey, let's build this site, right? It's gonna be responsive. It's gonna be great. So she's sitting down, and she wants to type like display block and display inline block and you know all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, but wait, you need to do this because you know IE. IE. She's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I know. And because we know CSS is broken, right? Like it just sucks. So she's going on. I'm like, okay, yeah, granted, it kind of sucks, IE. And she tries something else. I'm like, oh, but wait, you can't do that. You got to do this. She's like, really? And she's just like totally overwhelmed, right? Because CSS is broken. It's not that easy anymore. Well, it's getting easier for sure. But so my idea with Blink was to kind of fix CSS and to give you, I don't want to call it a preprocessor because it's really just node modules. It's not like my own DSL or anything like that. I'm not like parsing anything. So I'm just taking a node module and I'm reading it and I'm converting it into CSS. So there's a lot of stuff going on underneath the hood. The sun is in my eyes. Anyone have sunglasses? There we go, seriously. Or that. Did that work? Still there, over to the left. Left. Left, keep going. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Thanks. Cool. So let me talk a little bit about Blink so that you know kind of like why I'm building a CLI. And of course, if you want to look at the source code later on and kind of get like maybe a guideline for how to do things right, as if I did them right, I'm not sure, but you know, I think so. So it's going to be an well, it's already published as 0.10. So yes, it is an open source CSS authoring framework on the Node.js platform, complete with BEM methodology support. If you haven't heard about BEM, I'm not going to talk about it too much because it's quite detailed, but it stands for Block Element Modifier, and it's just a paradigm that you can use with your CSS if you want to build reusable components and you want to make them very maintainable and portable across different applications. So it's really great. I strongly suggest that you read into, if I go to my project right here, there should be a link to, yeah, the BEM syntax. This is the article, Mind BEMding, Getting Your Head Around BEM Syntax. You'll see the CSS selectors are rather verbose here. You got person, person underscore underscore hand. This is a block underscore element. And then you have person dash dash female, which is a block with a modifier. And then you have dash dash female underscore underscore hand, which is a block followed by a modifier followed by an element. And yes, we know that this is ugly, right? But the cool thing about it is that when you're dealing with CSS specificity issues, it's nice to know that you're always dealing with a CSS specificity of 1. So if you're not using, if you're not doing like person space hand, right, or space dot hand, you're getting now 2 points of specificity. Now you're trying to override that style somewhere else. It's broken. It's really the biggest problem with CSS. So BEM is really kind of a step forward into getting away from that broken CSS, and that's why that's why Blink is supposed to be trying to fix this. So how am I going to fix it, right? What are its features? So it runs on Node, right? You've got rules in there, which are just like your P, your your A tags, everything, body, HTML. That's what you'd use for just normal rules, right? But then you also have OOCSS with BEM syntax, which is for creating blocks, elements, and modifiers. And based on your configuration, you can decide how you want that to look, whether it's a double underscore and a dash dash, whatever. It's completely up to you. And then you also have extenders. If anyone's used Sass, you can use extenders to very much keep your CSS lean and don't repeat yourself in the generated output of the CSS. So those are already working in Blink just fine right now. You've got overrides. So say I say display inline block, right? The idea is that my wife should not have to know about IE. I don't want her to be concerned about that. I really don't want her complaining about that. So the idea here with an override is that you can create an extender, a function, right? And then every time somebody says display anything, it's going to hit my function. And it's going to give the inline block as the argument to that function. And I can make educated decisions about how I respond to that. So real quick, just to give you an idea about what's going on there. Show you a file that explains that more fully. So I've got the extender inline block. So the display file here is the override, and it's just basically loading the inline block extender and passing along the configuration. But the inline block is where the real magic happens. So can you see this? Zoom in. So this is TypeScript, in case you were wondering and you're saying it kind of looks like JavaScript, but not really. No, it's not. It's TypeScript. So you got type information here. So what this is doing here is it's got access to your configuration, which is important because maybe you decide that right now you want to support IE8, right, or IE7, but in a year from now, nobody's going to be using that at all. In fact, I don't think many people are using it right now, but still, not the point, right? If your company wants you to use IE7, you got to use it. So in your configuration, you can say, hey, I want to use IE7, and I don't want to be concerned about browser compatibility issues. Just let me do my thing, and you fix it for me, right? So right here, I'm making the decision that, hey, if you're using IE less than 8, I need to add these CSS hacks. And if you're using Firefox less than 3, I need to add this one, right? So that's really the idea, is that I don't want you to have to be concerned about those issues. So hopefully you guys like that idea, and you help me out later, because I got a lot more work to do on that front. So let's go back to this guy. I've also got a CLI provided with Blink. So you could, much like Sass and Compass and all that, you can just write, Blink compile, whatever. And that's what we're talking more about today, is how to build that CLI, right? And then it's got an API. So that's one thing that I think has been missing a lot from a lot of CSS preprocessors or even JavaScript ones, right? Like, I'm not terribly savvy on CoffeeScript, but I know that like with Sass and Compass, when you want to use a build tool for those, there's really no API for them that you can use in Node, and so you can't like actually use gulp the way it was intended because you don't have access to the compiled output. It writes files, yes, but you don't get access to the contents of those files straight up before writing the files. So this API allows you to actually run a Blink compile command, and as a result, it's going to give you a list of files with their source and destination file paths, and then also the contents of those files without actually writing the file for you. In this way, Grunt and Gulp can make better decisions about what to do with those files, and without creating any files, it just passes it along and pipes it to wherever you want it to be. So that's why the API is so important for a CSS tool like this. And then it's in TypeScript source already, so I don't have to worry about anyone creating a TypeScript definition file because I'm already in TypeScript. So they get all the information they need if they want to get that IntelliSense for free, done, for free. So, and I know it'll always be in sync with my application because it's referencing my TypeScript files directly. So I'll show you how to do that. down the line in the future, what I want to do, and what I almost finished this week, but not quite, is the responders, which is for responsive websites. You want to respond to different, breakpoints, right? So you should be able to do that, and you should be able to have extenders inside of responders and have it go as deep as you want, right? So that's one feature that's on the horizon. And if anyone's used Compass, it's kind of a dated tool now. It's getting older and older, right? But one of the cool things about it is that you can put spriting in it, and you can actually compute off of the dimensions of the images that you use for those sprites. So you can have a folder, right, with like hundreds of images in there. And you, in your CSS, instead of saying left 50%, top 50%, margin top negative 17 px, right? What you can do is be more expressive, and you can say top app sprite width, whatever it is. Like, let's say it's a wrench icon, wrench divided by 2 or -2, right? And then that will give you a more accurate placement of your icon or whatever inside whatever context you're displaying it. So that's really powerful, right? Because you can take a new asset that somebody gives you, you can drop it in there and replace your old wrench with a new wrench. It can be a completely different size, but guess what? You didn't have to change a lick of code, right? So that's one of the things I really would miss outside of Compass if I were to use a new tool. And it's the reason why I haven't switched to another tool, is because it does not have spriting like that. So it's really powerful, and I definitely want to bring that into Blink later on. Of course, I've been designing it with Grunt and Gulp in mind. So I want to make sure that my tool is completely compatible with these build tools, and that it doesn't have to go through any weird hoops to make things work. And that should actually increase performance as well. So if anyone wants to help out and contribute to that project, you're welcome to do so. I'm very open and greatly appreciate that help. So that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about with Blink. So now I think we are equipped to pretty much drop the slideshow and just go into the source code.